So yeah, I've been asked to come and preach the next couple of weeks, in part to get to know you all, in part so you can get to know me. And so I put together a little 3-sermon series with my favorite story from the Old Testament, my favorite story from Jesus, and my favorite story from the New Testament letters. And I hope to spice in some of my favorite stories about myself and my wife Trisha and our little baby Gwenny along the way, so that just so that we can get to know each other. I think that will be good. I fell down the stairs a couple of days ago. I'm going to go for the sympathy vote early. I was at, the in-laws, and I take the first step and do halfway down a flight of stairs. So, I'm bruised, I'm sore. You have to be nice to me. So my favorite story from the Old Testament comes right out of Exodus. If you want to sort of stick a bookmark there, we'll be in Exodus 1 through 4 today. And in my estimation, the story of Moses, the Exodus, the wandering in the wilderness is the pivotal story for the people of God. We're going to get the law, we're going to get Passover, which becomes communion, we're going to get sacrifice, we're going to talk about the Lamb, and all of these humongous monuments that we still hold today as Christians are going to come out of Exodus and Joshua and Deuteronomy and these sort of leaving Egypt books. And all of that is going to start with the figure of Moses. So that's what I want to talk about today. I want to share Moses' beginnings. And the key word for this is a little strange. It's going to be doubt. We might not think about that as Moses just sort of sits in our imagination. But the key to his beginning is doubt. And so by the time we get to the end of this message, that's what we're going to be talking about. We're going to talk about doubt. But before we get there, there is a really good campfire story. So I need you to picture, you've all been to campfire, right? This is Michigan. We sit around outside and light things on fire and eat marshmallows. It's good. I want you to picture a fire, right? People sitting around it. And now this is the hard part. I want you to picture that there are no cell phones and tablets, and the kids aren't running in to check their emails, and the adults aren't checking their sports scores. Because we're going all the way back to Hebrews. We are Israelites. We are bored because there's no television. So what do? We sit around a fire and tell stories. This happens at all of my family reunions. Because we have it in this little church that doesn't even have electricity, and we play bingo for 6 hours. I don't know if any of you have played, maybe some of you really enjoy bingo. I like it for the first 45 minutes, and I win my prize, and then we just sit there. And so there's this group of us that get together around the uncles and the grandpas, and we say, tell us a story. Tell us the same story you told last year. Tell us the same story we heard 3 years ago, because you're good at it, right? So I want you to picture, I just walked through the fire. I want you to picture the fire, Hebrews sitting around it, and the younger kids are getting bored. They're saying, tell us a story, tell us a story, tell us the one about Moses. I think Moses would be a pretty regular story. So these people are sitting around. Touch the fire. If you open up to Exodus 1, I want you to have the thought of this campfire. And if your Bible's set up like mine, just before Exodus 1, you can see the end of Genesis. The very last verse of Genesis. So Joseph died at the age of 110, and after he was embalmed, he was placed in a coffin in Egypt. This is important in case you need a refresher for your history here. Joseph came to Egypt, saved them all from famine, brought his family in. He became like second in charge of the whole country. The Hebrews had it pretty good. So Exodus starts out. These are the names of the sons of Israel who went with Jacob. Yep, a bunch of names. Verse 6. Now Joseph and all his brothers in that generation died. They're all gone. New generation. But the Israelites were fruitful and multiplied greatly and became exceedingly numerous, so that the land was full of them. If you didn't get the message, fruitful, multiplied greatly, extremely numerous, land was filled with them. There are a lot of Hebrews living in Egypt. Then a new king who did not know about Joseph came into power. Look, he said to his people, the Israelites have become much too numerous for us. We must deal with them shrewdly, or they will become even more numerous. And if war breaks out, they will join our enemies, fight against us, and leave the country. Numerous, numerous, numerous people. Foreigners, aliens, people who aren't like us. And there are way too many of them. So what are we going to do? All right, step 1, make them slaves. That's the next verse. Verse 11. So they put slave masters over them to oppress them with forced labor. And they built Pithom and Ramses as store cities for Pharaoh. But the more they were oppressed, the more they multiplied. More and more and more and more Israelites in the land. The more they multiplied and spread. Now listen here to the emotion. So the Egyptians came to dread the Israelites. Dread them. That is a hope for something terrible to happen in the future. A fear that something terrible will happen in the future. I told you I wanted to let you get to know me. I am afraid of spiders. I dread that after I've turned the water on in the shower and I'm standing in there, I will see a spider. I dread this. So I have developed a habit. Anytime I'm going to take a shower, you open the curtain, you look for a spider, you look there for a spider. My dread has produced some action. Maybe not quite as extreme as what we're about to read, but tidbit about me and my wife. We dread spiders. But I'm the man in the house, so she says, kill the spider. And I say, I don't want to. Verse 13, what did their dread cause? They dreaded the Israelites and worked them ruthlessly. They made their lives bitter with hard labor, in brick and mortar, and with all kind of work in the fields. In all their hard labor, the Egyptians used them ruthlessly. Are you catching that repetition is a big part here? Ruthless, bitter, ruthless. Lots of Israelites treated poorly. The king of Egypt said to the Hebrew midwives, think about our campfire. We're just about to get to the story. The kids who said, tell us about Moses, tell us about Moses. And of course the old people go on and on and on about all this stuff that's not about Moses. The king of Egypt said to the Hebrews' midwives, whose names were Shiphrah and Puah, when you help the Hebrew women in childbirth and observe them on the delivery stool, pause, delivery stool? Unpause. If it is a boy, kill him. But if it is a girl, let her live. Pharaoh is talking to Hebrews, right? The Hebrew midwives have just been commanded to kill their own people's baby boys. This is a challenge. This is a faith challenge already. But remember, this is a Hebrew campfire we're hearing the story at. So we're already excited. We can't wait to hear how they're going to deal with this. The midwives, however, feared God, all right, and did not do what the king of Egypt had told them to do. They let the boys live. So the king of Egypt is upset, and he summons them. Why have you done this? Why have you let the boys live? I want you to listen really closely like you're a Hebrew here. Like these are your people. Like this is who you identify with, because this is a great line. The midwives answered Pharaoh, Hebrew women are not like the Egyptian women. They are vigorous and give birth before the midwives can even get there. And I just picture them turning and snickering. Egyptian women. even just said this to the Pharaoh, the guy in charge of all Egyptians. Our women are so much stronger than your women. We can't even get there fast enough. This is good stuff. So God was kind to the midwives, and the people increased and became even more numerous. And he even gave families to the midwives. So, campfire. Fire, old people talking. The old grandpa says, and the Hebrew midwives told Pharaoh that the Egyptian women are not like the Hebrew women. The Hebrew women are vigorous. And you can picture the grandkids snickering or clapping or cheering. This is a good story. But all of it is leading up to Moses. Verse 22. Then Pharaoh gave the order to all people, Hebrew and Egyptian and midwife. Every boy that is born you must throw into the Nile, but the girls you can let live. So Pharaoh is upping the ante. He's saying it is all of yours responsibility to throw the baby boys in the river. Now we get to Moses. This is the world Moses is coming into. A world where the outright slaughter of Hebrew boys is a nationalistic responsibility. The king of the entire nation has said, throw the baby boys in the river. And this is where our Hebrew boy is born into. Now a man in the house of Levi married a Levite woman. We're going to start skipping around a little bit. They had a kid. It was a boy. And the mother hid it for 3 months. Now, Trish and I were discussing this. We've had a 3-month-old. They cry a lot. So I don't think they're hiding the baby in the closet. I think they're dressing Moses up like a girl. However you do that as a Hebrew in the middle of Egypt. Maybe there's a little, pink reed on his head. I don't know. But I'm not convinced that they're hiding the baby. But I am convinced that they're protecting their child. That this is important enough to them to risk the wrath of Pharaoh. But there comes a time, for whatever reason, the baby's getting bigger. You can't hide that it's a boy. The neighbors have found out about the baby. For whatever reason, this baby is found out, or about to be found out. And so the mother gets a basket. She waterproofs it. She puts the baby in it. And then she goes to the Nile, and she sets the basket in the reeds. Now she's following the law. She's doing what she's supposed to do, but she's doing it very particularly. And the Bible tells us that Moses' sister stays behind and watches what's going to happen. Maybe she's curious. Maybe she's going to save Moses if something goes wrong. Maybe she just thinks mom's crazy. But for whatever reason, Moses' sister is hiding and watching. And Moses is sitting in a basket. This is no longer a campfire. Nile River. Nile River. Moses is in the river. At the exact spot, coincidentally, where Pharaoh's daughter goes to take her baths, where she bathes. Coincidentally, because I think this was the plan. I think Moses' mom said, God, I'm giving you a shot here. I'm going to do my best. I'm going to give my son a chance. And so Pharaoh's daughter comes in and she's taking her bath. And it says her attendants were walking along the side of the river. And she spies this basket. And she says, what's that? What's that sticking in the river over there? And so the attendants go to the basket. They take the lid off, and there's this baby screaming. The Bible says the baby was crying. Because if you put a baby in a basket and put the lid on it, it will cry. Believe me, I put Gwendolyn in bed, shut the light off, and closed the door, and she cries. It's not funny. It's a little funny. And as soon as they find out it's a baby, listen to this. Moses' sister pops out. Right where's she at right now? She's hiding. What's going on over there? They find the baby, and she goes, hey, you want me to find a mom to take care of that baby for you? Now, I've read that story dozens of times. Like I said, favorite story in the Old Testament. And I have never caught that this girl is just hiding off to the side until they find the baby. hey, you want me to find a mom to take care of this baby for you? And Pharaoh's daughter goes, oh, that's a great idea. You go find a mom. I'm going to take care of this baby when it's older because I don't do the baby thing. So Moses' sister goes to Moses' mom and says, hey, Mom, there's this baby. It's your baby. Do you think that maybe you could feed it and take care of it? Oh, and they're going to pay you to do it. River gone. Campfire back. Little kids. Oh, those Egyptians are so stupid, we kicked their butts. Yes. Right? Because baby Moses is now getting not killed, but instead his mom is getting paid to take care of the baby she just put in the river. Because Hebrews are so much smarter than Egyptians. All right, where are we at here? Chapter 2. Chapter 2, verse 10. Chapter 2, verse 10. When the child grew older, she took him to Pharaoh's daughter, and he became her son. She named him Moses, saying, I drew him out of the water. So Moses, the baby who should have died, is now living in the upper echelons of Egyptian society as the son of Pharaoh's daughter. And the story just goes ahead and fast forwards. One day after Moses had grown up, verse 11, he went out to where his people were, the Hebrews, and watched them at hard labor. He saw an Egyptian beating a Hebrew, one of his own people. There's a repetition again. His people, his own people. He is a Hebrew. Glancing this way and that, is anybody watching? He killed the Egyptian and hid him in the sand. Moses watches his own people being oppressed, and he checks if he's going to get in trouble, and then he kills the guy. Which, as the Hebrews around the campfire, we might be thinking, yeah, because the Hebrews are better than the Egyptians. And as the Christians sitting in the pews are going, that might be a little extreme, Moses. There's some tension here, but we're glad Moses is still going. Until the next day, when he shows up and sees two Hebrews arguing, and he says, why are you two arguing? We're our people. This is us. Knock it off. And one of them says, why? What are you going to do? Kill me? And Moses realizes that he's in trouble. Because it doesn't matter if you're Pharaoh's daughter's adopted son, you can't go around killing Egyptian taskmasters. So it says that Pharaoh wants to kill Moses, and he gets out of there. He runs away to the farm country, the nowhere country. The places where slaves run away to, and it's kind of worse. So he goes from the upper tier of Egyptian society to the middle of nowhere. And in the middle of nowhere, he saves some girls who are being hassled by some shepherds. He ends up marrying one of them, and he just becomes a farmer, which is awesome. I'm all about farmers. I grew up next to a farm. Chickens and goats and llamas, which are the dirtiest animals I've ever interacted with. But I'm pro-farming. Just put that in your checkbox. Farming, good. But not for Moses, right? I'm going to keep doing this motion. Upper echelon of Egyptian society, poor farmer in the middle of nowhere. But let's not forget, supposed to be baby drowned in the river. So all in all, it's like a wash. It's good. And this is where our story, for my purposes, really takes off. Because Moses is going to have an extremely strange encounter with God. If you look in chapter 3, verse 1. Now Moses was tending the flock of Jethro, his father-in-law, the priest of Midian. And he led the flocks to the far side and came to Horeb, the mountain of God. There, the angel of the Lord appeared to him, put your listening ears on here, in flames of fire within a bush. Moses is out tending some sheep. In the distance, there's a bush, and it's on fire. And the next verse is going to say, And Moses looked at the bush and thought, I'm curious why this bush is not burning up. Let's go check it out. Because tending sheep is boring. He's been here all day long, probably days and days, watching these stupid animals, and sheep are stupid, eat. And he sees this bush burning in the distance, and the Bible is so understated here. It says, and he was curious what was going on, so let's go take a look. So he goes and he takes a look. And before he can get to the bush, God says, stop. Moses, take off your shoes because you are entering holy ground. Bush on fire that's not going away, and it's talking. This is the best day of this shepherd's life. So he takes his shoes off, and I wish I had a good reason to make you all take your shoes off right now, but I don't. Sorry. Maybe that's good for some of your noses. Verse 5, chapter 3, verse 5. Do not come any closer, God said. Take off your sandals, for this is holy ground. Then he said, I am the God of your father, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. At this, Moses hid his face because he was afraid to look at God. Up until this point, it's an awesome curiosity. Burning, talking bush in the middle of nowhere. This is fun. And then it hits him like a ton of bricks. This is the God of his people. The powerful God who did crazy miracles for all of these people that were just named. And Moses rightly hides his face, which is probably kind of embarrassing at this point because I get the feeling he's not taking it real serious. This is a curiosity. He's close to it. He's checking it out. Bush said, Moses, and Moses says, I'm here. Take your shoes off. Take my shoes off. And then he hears, I am God. And he drops down and covers his face because this is a big deal. And God is scary. If we lose one thing out of the Old Testament, I feel like it's that God is scary. This is the guy that made the world, that flooded the world, that has just done these crazy, amazing, powerful things. And he scares Moses. Verse 7, chapter 3. I have indeed seen the misery of my people in Egypt. I have heard them crying out because of their slave drivers, and I am concerned about their suffering. So I have come down to rescue them from the hands of the Egyptians, and to bring them up out of that land into a good and spacious land, a land flowing with milk and honey, the home of the Canaanites, Hittites, Amorites. More names. Verse 9. And now the cry of the Israelites has reached me, and I have seen the way the Egyptians are oppressing them. I want you to picture that Moses is still hiding his face while God is talking. This is not a face-to-face conversation with the Lord Almighty. This is Moses in fear. And I think this is all good news. You should do that, God. This is great. You're so amazing. Verse 10. So now go. I am sending you to Pharaoh to bring my people, the Israelites, out of Egypt. God waits to the end of his amazing list to say, and you're going to do it. And at this, maybe Moses is still hiding his face. Maybe he looks back to the bush. What we know for sure is that this Moses speaks to God. Who am I that I should go to Pharaoh and bring the Israelites out of Egypt? This is where the doubts begin. In essence, this is where our sermon begins. All of this has been backstory to lead to Moses' interaction with God. And not just an interaction with God, but a command, a commissioning, a challenge. And the first thing that happens when Moses is challenged is he questions himself. God says, do this, and Moses says, who am I? I'm nobody. I'm a baby that should have been killed. I'm a nobody farmer in the middle of nowhere. Who am I? I'm a murderer. My reputation is that I kill people who don't do what I want back in Egypt. My father-in-law is the priest of Midian. Why don't you send him? He's a holy guy, right? Who am I? And it's interesting because God doesn't talk about Moses. Moses says, who am I? And God is going to speak about himself. Look at verse 12. And God said, I will be with you. And this will be the sign to you that it is I who sent you. When you have brought the people out of Egypt, you will worship God on this mountain. Moses' first doubt is, who am I? And God does not tell him, you are good, you are worthwhile, you are prepared, you are equipped, you are the guy. Moses says, who am I? And God says, I'll be there with you. This is important for us. This is important for me in ministry because the number one thing that I hear when I go to somebody and say, hey, could you do this? They say, I'm no good at that. That's not my gift. I've never done that before. And this isn't just in ministry. My wife and I say this in our own lives. Our friends and I say this. We're like, I really think I should do this, but I'm no good at it. And then we look within ourselves to find the power, the tools we need to do it. And that's not God's answer to Moses. Moses says, who am I? I can't do this. And God says, you're right. I'll be there. Now, I'm not sold on the miracle part, though, the sign. God says, and after it's all worked out great, I'll show you it was me who did it. As a human being, that's not the sign I want. I'm like, no, God, you give me something up front, and then we'll see. Verse 13. Moses said to God, suppose I go to the Israelites and say to them, the God of your fathers has sent me. And they ask me, what is his name? What should I tell them? Doubt number one, who am I? Doubt number two, who are you? Why should I listen to you? And I don't know that Moses is really asking, what if the elders say, who are you? If I'm in Moses' shoes, I'm saying to that burning bush, who are you? You're going to be with me. That's great. What does that mean? And God has a lot to say about this. God said to Moses, I am who I am. Or you can read that into the future. I will be who I will be. I am God eternal. I am the God your people know about. Verse 15, say to the Israelites, the Lord, the God of your fathers, the God of Abraham, you know that story, Hebrews sitting around the campfire. The God of Isaac, you know that story, Hebrews sitting around the campfire. The God of Jacob, you know that story, Hebrews sitting around the campfire. You know that story, Hebrews in Egypt in slavery. He has sent me to you. This is my name forever, the name by which I am to be remembered from generation to generation. And then God tells Moses, go and get the elders together, tell them the plan, tell them why you're here, it's going to be great. They're going to listen to you. Verse 18, the elders of Israel will listen to you. But I know that the king will not listen to you when you say, let my people go. Chapter 4, we're going to skip to the next doubt. First doubt was, who am I? God says, I will be with you. Second doubt was, who are you? And God says, you remember me. This is both a command and an encouragement. You remember what I have done for you. Again, that's important for our life. The only faith that we have is our history with God. And sometimes it's a shared history with other Christians in our life. Very, very early on in our faith, we depend on the stories of other people, the stories of the Bible, to go ahead and tell us God is good, God is faithful, God is powerful. But when Moses questions God, his answer is, you remember what I have done. Moses is starting to grasp at straws here, chapter 4. And just to remind us, burning bush, Moses without shoes, talking fire. And Moses says, What if they do not believe me or listen to me? Who am I? Who are you? What is this message? This job? What if I can't actually do it? What if circumstances mess it up? What if I get there and I do my best and you do your best and they just don't listen? I think that way. I've planned youth retreats, I've planned sermon series, I've planned mission trips, and I always just leave this little margin of error. What if we get there and nothing works? And the van breaks down, and the church we're supposed to stay at cancels on us, and the people who want to do the VBS say no. I think it's been a long story so far, and there's a really good break coming up here, because we're going to get some miracles. So Moses says, what if they don't listen? And God says, what's in your hand? It's a staff, God. And God says, well, throw that on the ground. So now Moses, after a day of shepherding, is taking strange orders from a bush that's on fire that he knows is now God. What's in your hand? A stick. Throw it on the ground. All right. But this is key if you're following along. It says, he threw the stick on the ground, it became a snake, and Moses ran away. God has a really good sense of humor. He could have said, Moses, I'm going to turn that stick into a snake, just you wait. Really? All right. No, he says, what's in your hand? A stick. Throw it on the ground. Snake, run away. So now Moses is far away, and God says, hey, Moses, no, come back, grab the snake, pick it up. Okay, it's good. And then God says, I got another one. If they don't listen to that, stick your hand in your jacket. Is it going to become a snake, God? Because I don't want a snake. Sticks his hand in his jacket, and he pulls it out, and it is leprous. Diseased skin. The Bible says like snow. Flakes. Is gross. Puts it back in, it comes back to normal. Thanks, God. Whew, that's a good one. And then God says, if they don't take those two, you're going to dump some water on the ground, it's going to turn into blood. And then they'll believe you. This is where things get out of hand. Moses finally says, I'm bad at talking, I can't speak. God says, I gave you your mouth, I'll take care of it. I will give you what you need to do this. I just made a stick into a snake, and you're worried about your tongue? Turn that into a snake. God might not be quite as snarky as I am. I, in fact, hope that he's not. Finally, the conclusion of our heroic story of Moses, the baby who should be dead, who was saved by a miracle, who became a farmer, who's talking to a burning bush in the middle of nowhere, the conclusion of our strong Hebrew hero is verse 13, chapter 4, verse 13. But Moses said, O Lord, and I think this is like a, oh Lord, please send someone else to do it. You've answered all of my doubts, Lord. I know it's about you and not me. I know there's miraculous signs. I know you're a powerful God in history. But this is not for me. I'm done. Then the anger of the Lord burned. What is the Lord right now? Little audience participation. Where is God? So when it says the anger of the Lord burned, this word is on purpose. I know my childhood is watching the Disney animated Prince of Egypt, Pretty Colors, and then the whole screen turns red and orange and I scream as a kid. The bush is on fire and God's anger burns. This is scary. But God answers that doubt too. What about your brother Aaron? He's a good speaker. He's already on his way. Got it taken care of, Moses. You are still going. Oh. So he goes, and he does it. And our Hebrew campfire knows the rest of the story. God's people are saved. They are liberated from Egypt. They wander the wilderness and screw that up. They start a nation and screw that up. We become Christians because Jesus comes and we continue to screw that up. But did the plan happen? Yes. Is God powerful? Yes. Did Moses have doubts? Yes. And too often we as Christians look back at our heroic Bible story people, even heroic people from the nation, George Washington, all these people, and we forget that they weren't perfect. Moses was far from perfect. He's in a line with Paul, right? They're both murderers who go on to work for Jesus. I'm not as bad as those guys. I can probably do some pretty amazing things, but I need to be allowed to have doubts because God allows it. If God calls me to do something incredibly scary, like talk to my neighbors, like save an entire nation of people from a tyrannical ruler. No, like talk to my neighbors, like teach Sunday school, like tithe, like I don't have to do the same scary stuff Moses has done, but I'm totally allowed to say, God, I'm not sure about this. How is this going to work? I'm not good enough. And the Christians in my life get to let me do that and encourage that and encourage me. Because we know that in the end, God will answer all of our doubts. Just like he did for Moses. Growing up, I watched all of my doubts get criticized or squashed by the church. When I had a question, I was, Christians don't think like that. You just have to be stronger. You just have to hold on. You just have to do something. That's not what God said to Moses. He answered every one of Moses' doubts. Now, I think we can take this back a step. People have doubts about the very existence of God. And sometimes we get really frustrated about those people or those questions. But I think we can take a lesson from burning bush Moses. And we can encourage questions. And we can encourage these people who are doubting. And we can help give them some answers. But what we can't do is say, no, doubts are bad, get rid of all doubts. If you have a doubt, you're a bad Christian. Because that's how I felt growing up. And so I spent years just not asking Christians questions. And I wasted a lot of time. And a phrase that Todd used in Sunday school that I'll wrap up with here. He said, sometimes people get stuck in guilt holes that they can never climb out of, because when you feel guilty, you just feel more guilty. If there's anybody here who's felt guilty about having doubts about God's calling in your life, just reread Exodus 1 through 4. And you ask God every question you can think of. Because God is bigger than our doubts. Forever and ever, amen. Would you pray with me? Heavenly Father, we love you. We thank you for being the God that you are and for loving us and blessing us the way that you do. We thank you for this Bible story, this story of Moses, where you were alive and active in history, and we get to hear it. Lord, I pray that we can share our doubts with you. I pray that we can know you already know them, and that we can be a people who support and encourage those with questions, because that's what you do. Lord, I thank you so much that you've answered numerous doubts in my own life. Most of all, I thank you that Jesus has come and answered the biggest doubt of all, which is, can we be saved? Can we be with you? And because of him, the answer is yes. It's in his name we pray. Amen.